impact of. I don't know if you want to kind of jump on those.
Yeah, we're talking about privacy and trust on the intranets. Well, I guess on the internets, because on the intranets is a slightly different thing, and then you're inside of your company's own internet. Hopefully, you don't have too many trust issues there. But yeah, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. So first, I just wanted to quickly go over before we get into the actual topic that we're going to discuss about. I just wanted to quickly touch on this thing called an alternate reality game, an ARG.
Which games are perfect for Twitch platforms. So there you go. A game you might not have actually played or been involved with.
And I'm going to be dating myself here, but in '97, a film came out with Michael Douglas called The Game. And it was the basic premise was that he was, kind of a successful banker, had just witnessed something horrible happen. He was kind of like in the dumps, as it were. And his brother gives him a ticket for a, quote, game that was sort of like this interactive, real, IRL kind of game. And Michael Douglas's character just kind of goes through what he perceives to not be the game, in fact, but it was all staged with actors, and they had all these experiences that happened to him in real life as himself, as a real person, where he wasn't a character or anything like that. And at the very end, it's, spoiler alert, but it was just a game after all. So it's an alternate reality game, and Wikipedia describes it specifically as an interactive, networked narrative that uses the real world as a platform and employs transmedia storytelling to deliver a story that may be altered by players' ideas or actions. Basically, it's an ever-evolving adventure, if you will, in real time with yourself as a real player, as yourself. And there's, essentially some game master somewhere that is orchestrating certain things, but at the same time, your own actions are also driving the story. Not unlike, a choose your own adventure book, taken to, 3D, 3D space, kind of.
Yeah, and this is very much like an RPG in real life in a way, right? And you are, as Tatiana said, the character. And you're using real life elements rather than digital items. You're using something tangible right in front of you. And a lot of times they use the medium of the internet, as well as email, mail, and other forms of communication. But primarily it's always been the internet. Right.
So, and the reason we bring this up is because we will be talking about an ARG in our topic. So, essentially, if you're not familiar, Mr. Robot, which is
it's a drama basically that's on the USA Network.
Yeah.
And what that TV show is about a guy who works for a multinational company, and he is also a vigilante hacker as kind of his night job, if you will, and he gets basically brought into the ranks of an undercover group, or not really undercover group, but a group of hackers, basically. I guess in the sense kind of like an anonymous. And their goal is to take down multinational corporations because they feel like those companies are ruining society. And so he joins them and he believes in what they're saying, but he goes into moral conflict because basically he knows some of these people. He knows the industry, he understands it, and even though he hates parts of it, there are other aspects of it that he understands and becomes very personal to him. So it becomes this big moral issue between what does he do, how does he act and react to certain things between the two, between the company and also this vigilante hacker group. And so this all comes together now concerning this ARG, and
USA Network and Mozilla had worked together to do a tie-in, an ARG tie-in for the show, for Mr. Robot. And that was an extension that was supposed to be a promotional, like I said, a promotional ARG tie-in with the show. Mozilla did an extension on their Firefox that was installed unbeknownst to Firefox users. And then when when the users found out, and of course took to the Twitters, Mozilla was like, oh, whoops. Well, let us explain what this is, right? And that's always a flag, anyways, right? Like if you hadn't done anything wrong, you don't have to explain anything, right? But the initial version of that Firefox extension just had a cryptic Lewis Carroll quote, which was, let me see if I can find it. My reality is just different than yours. And we actually have a capture of that particular, how the extension looked like when you were in the Firefox browser. And then, of course, some people's reactions to it. But essentially, once they kind of had this backlash of what the F is this extension in my browser, Mozilla updated it and included some text explaining its purpose, explaining that it was an alternate, it was part of this alternate reality game, that it was tied in with Mr. Robot, and so on and so forth. But the issue here at hand is, of course, now that, okay, I'm using a browser, and then the browser just installs extensions for me, doing God knows what.
Oh, yeah. And this is to clarify, too. They never mentioned once in any kind of patch release notes or anything like that concerning any updates to the browser. They never mentioned this extension, which was called Looking Glass. Mm-hmm. And so people just happen across it and go, what the hell is this? And of course, with the kind of coded language of the quote, people are going, oh my God, am I actually being hacked here? Like, am I already at a security risk of some sort? And the thing that, of course, I think the marketing team completely missed out on is that...
Just the one thing?
Well, yeah, there's many. But the thing is that when you get people worked up enough or shocked enough, there's only two responses, and they are such polars of each other. One is you're going to get people, once it's announced, okay, hey guys, sorry, this is just an extension for an ARG that we're doing for the USA Network, for Mr. Robot, and it does nothing to your browsing experience or anything else, and it only works if you opt into the game. Now, once they clarified that, you're going to get one of two responses. One is like, okay, phew, good, I'm not being hacked, whatever, it's basically an inert extension, I don't care, move on. The other people, though, are going to be super freaking pissed. And for a really good reason. One, you scared the hell out of them because they're thinking they're getting hacked, which, again, there's been so many reports of hacking and of our privacy being basically bombarded by companies and so forth, or hackers, and them taking our information. And then to do something like this, yeah, they're going to be super pissed about it, and they're going to be frustrated because you never gave them forewarning. At least, if it's a marketing ploy, at least give them some forewarning, unless this was a part of that marketing ploy, right? That they were hoping people would find it and go, oh my God, hackers, and go, hey, JK, it's really for a TV show about hacking. Hey, because they are getting a ton of publicity from this. They have articles right now on Mashable, articles on The Verge, articles on GeekWire, Ars Technica, CNET, you name it. I mean, the Mozilla name, Mr. Robot, they're being put everywhere. So if it's a marketing campaign, then hey, I guess, more power to you if, especially you're going for the audience who aren't Mozilla fans and don't really care. But at least they're seeing the name. But for a Mozilla fan, it is very concerning, though. I mean, what we're looking at is the fact that they can put anything, as you said, onto your browser without you knowing it. Yes.
And, there's some Mozilla employees that also took to the Twitter and tried to... I guess salvage the situation, which is always commendable, especially if maybe you weren't the person in charge of, pushing the button to implement it or giving the go-ahead order. But Dan Callahan said, for ARG players, the more a game is able to manifest in the real world, the better. By using an add-on, the experience could manifest outside of the game's domains, furthering immersion. As a former ARG player, this type of thing would be truly fantastic, so long as it's opt-in. That's kind of the catch, right? Because technically, an ARG isn't an opt-in. Like, it is and it isn't, right? Because you might say, yes, I want to be part of this alternate reality game, but you don't know all of the things that are going to happen. So how can you really truly say yes to everything without, truly understanding that it could technically be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you, as I guess the game master of an ARG, have to be careful that you don't push the limits. But what, like we talked last time about art and arson, where's the line? Who draws the line, right? And then the same Dan Callahan goes on to say, Looking Glass is a really cool idea in stars for users who want it. Pushing it to everyone, even in an inert state, was not good. There's a lot of reasonable, why wasn't I consulted right now? Hopeful that we'll learn from this. Which is the other thing, right? Exactly. Why was it pushed out to everybody who had Firefox, right? That's some kind of nefarious thing right there.
Well, that, or it's the fact too of just pure laziness.
Right. Maybe they didn't want to see who did actually opt into this ARG. How do you even opt in? I guess if you watch the show and they say go to this website.
Here's a QR code, scan it and go. Yeah, I don't know. None of these articles actually mention the process of the ARG itself and the direct connections to the TV show Mr. Robot. They just kept pushing the fact that, hey, this code was pushed out. There are concerns now from people that unknown Mozilla developers can distribute add-ons to users without their permission. They can distribute add-ons to users without their knowledge. So not even just permission. You can say no all you want, but the fact is you're not even going to know when these go up. So that's another concerning issue. In that the fact is that evidently these developers don't realize the consequences of what they're doing.
Or they do, and like you said, they're either lazy and they're like, meh, whatever. This is fine. This works. Or, they're working, these companies, are working on the basis of ask for forgiveness, not permission. Which seems to be, I feel like,
that's a going theme in business. It really is.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that. Like, I've worked in enough businesses and created enough businesses where it's like, yeah, no, I know that this is kind of the mentality. Well, we'll just do and see how far we can get, and then if we have to pull back a little bit, we'll reel it back as we can.
Right. But the issue, still remains. I mean, we're just seeing all these trends, right? Of, you're online and you're using the software that's free, but even the ones that you pay for, right? Netflix from last time, and you're basically a commodity, right? Your information, your habits, your data, everything. It's an asset. It's like it's an asset. It's something that somebody sells to somebody else or uses in some way. And it's interesting because as more and more people actually go online now, it kind of feels like we're just all some number on somebody's accountant's spreadsheet, right? Like,
yeah, well, it's kind of like going in and barcoding everyone,
right?
It's like, oh, this is number 3552222. You bought boxer shorts on Amazon, so now we're going to show you a bunch of Hanes commercials. Thanks for shopping.
Right, and it's kind of crazy.
And again, though, not to bombard Mozilla with a lot of hate here, as again, it is something that's harmless overall, at least in the sense of that specific extension of Looking Glass on Firefox, but it's still the fact of trust. And what else are they doing that we never realized they could do? Because again, we're not reading the terms of service. We're not going through the layers of legalese because, well, one, who has the time, because we'd be doing that for every product, every service we have. But also it's just the fact that no one's out there like really trying to simplify things. It's almost like in many ways, many of these businesses want the more abstract information out there or want it to seem overwhelming, so you don't look into it, and it works out for everyone because in a way, in that sense, for them, ignorance is bliss.
Right, and the only reason all of this stuff ever bubbles to the surface is because somebody saw it, somebody caught on to it, somebody blew the whistle, quote unquote. And it's interesting because how many more of these things are actually happening though, and they're just not getting caught, right? And we definitely, I feel like, put a lot of trust I certainly do in the companies that produce the things that I use online, where I'm like, okay, you're not gonna fuck me over. I trust you that you won't. But now but there's so many examples recently that it feels sort of like, oh well, my trust is not well placed.
Oh yeah,
and that's sad. But
well, and this is the kicker too, is that it is actually, at least in the U.S., at least it was. I mean, I would imagine it still is, but it's actually illegal for someone to add you onto their e-newsletter without you giving permission to it. So if you're all of a sudden being added on to e-newsletters and being bombarded by all this spam, you can actually go against them. And there are several websites that give you information on how to go after these companies, because legally they're not allowed to do that. But yet what's amazing is that things like this are being put under the radar, or being swept under the rug, where, okay, well, you can't bombard people to their face, but you can bombard them secretly underneath layers of code and underneath layers of user interface, and just basically hide it and go, well, I mean, they don't know, so we can still get away with it, right?
Right. And I mean, they're not upset. They haven't said anything.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
I mean, if they said something, and if it impacts our pocketbooks, if it impacts our wallets, then, I mean, we'll back away. Of course we won't do that again.
Of course. But someone has to say something first.
Exactly.
It's like, what? Also, welcome, Lily. She says, we're all just numbers here in Norway. So are we in the U.S. Social security numbers. That we use birthdays and a given number to be identified in the system.
I mean, it is true. I mean, to a point, it's like, yes, I understand the idea of organization, kind of like an organizational tool for everyone. But yeah, there is also that factor of, well, when you become a dollar sign to someone, where are the ethics and the morals, and what are those lines? And, I would say that we can't say perfectly what those lines are, per se, because I know that there are many points of views on that. But I think it's important to know things like this, because of the fact that there might be other issues out there that we don't realize. For instance, I mean, Windows is notorious for doing this, and they've had a huge backlash. Windows, as of this past year, started making Windows 10, of course, free to everyone. Well, why is it free, you say? Before, I had to buy a disc, right? I had to buy it on the side of a PC. So what's going on here? Well, it's because they put into their system that they can take your data, and then they can sell that data. So where you're shopping, where you're going, what apps you're using, they can also forcibly download apps from their app store onto your Windows machine. And so there's been a huge backlash, because people are getting tired of getting stupid ass things like Candy Crush, onto their computer system when they never asked for it. And actually, if you look at the reviews, there are tons of reviews against these Windows apps that are saying, hey, this was installed on my computer without my permission. I've deleted it now 4 or 5 times, and this needs to stop. This is also, in a way, becoming harassment. And so, they've waned on it, and they said, oh, we're going to go back on it. We won't do that. We apologize. And then other times, they're caught again doing the same thing. So a lot of this really isn't changing. But it's very interesting to where this is going and what companies are doing. And I think it's important for everyone to realize, especially the tech companies, this is nothing new. Again, as I said, Windows has been doing it this whole year, and there hasn't been this much backlash in comparison to the most recent Mozilla.
Right. Well, and I think, there's been a lot of sensitive topics that have come up in the last few weeks, certainly in America, I'm sure all over the world as well. That I think people are just more aware, they're just more aware of stuff happening, and that they're more aware of, hey, you know what? I don't like this. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to say something about it too.
Right. And
which is always good.
You can never expect anyone to just stand up for you. If you have a voice and you have an opinion, you should share it, and you should share it appropriately, but you should still share it, because ideally, other people have that same concern, the same questions or thoughts, but everyone's waiting for that other person to stand up for them. And a lot of times that just doesn't happen. So this cycle perpetuates for years and years and years. And all of a sudden you hear about these companies that, 40 years ago were doing horrible things, and, people were questioning it, but no one was really standing up. And everyone was going, well, yeah, I knew that they were pretty shady, but, we didn't really do anything.
Yeah. And then, I read when I've had this I've been talking with some people about this, I read a lot of science fiction novels and stuff, and it's interesting because there's many authors who actually have, their vision of the world is very much like we're just numbers. Corporations run the world. Nobody cares about anybody. And that theme is so prevalent, I feel. And there's always, people rising up in small little revolts here and there against these big corporations and everything like that. And I feel like it's not a new trend, certainly, in authors sort of envisioning this future. But now that we are sort of in the future, spiraling rapidly towards it, I can definitely see some of the warning signs. They're there. And there's that movie Demolition Man, that came out in the 90s.
Oh yeah.
And I remember everyone was kind of joking around like, oh haha, it was a fast food restaurant wars or something, and Taco Bell won. And I remember thinking like, well, that's silly. And now it's like, well, companies are buying out companies. People are again, just sort of numbers on a spreadsheet, it feels like. So it's not too far off.
Well, and again, our conversation, especially when it involves privacy and data, it all falls back really to rules and regulations. Who's doing the checks and balances for this system? Because too many of these companies, they're not trying to be malicious. I don't think earnestly, at least most of the people within those companies, but they're going, okay, well, this is allowed. It's not illegal. So if it's not considered illegal, then we should be allowed to do it. And, again, it's about our company making more money, and we'll create more jobs and ideally, offer more services or more products. And again, that's kind of the ideal world, right? The ideal perspective of that. But then again, there's also people who just want the bottom dollar. They want the bottom line, which is all the money they can get, and then they invest it back into their CEO or their board of directors, and that's just what happens. I say this, I don't think they're always malicious, though some are. I think really it's just there's no rules or checks and balances or regulations to keep things in line as there should be.